Fear. Fear is a bit of an interesting thing to define. It's something we don't really understand, something we can't grasp the concept of, and that leads us with nothing but terror. Especially as a child, we fear things we don't understand, things that stay with us for the rest of our lives. We all had little things in our childhood that we were afraid of, irrational fears or things that just spooked us when we were younger. I had quite a few of those things, I'd like to say, and so in this video I'm going to be counting down 10 of those things that scared the absolute crap out of me as a child, and still a little today. So in no particular order, let us begin. We begin with a bit of an obscure one that I can't really narrow down to this day. I have absolutely no idea exactly what it was, and despite my efforts I cannot find it. But when I was a kid, my two most frequented sites were Hot Wheels and Cartoon Network, both of which contained flash games that kept me entertained for far longer than they should have. On the former was many games of cartoons I'd never even seen before, as I was never gifted enough to have cable, such as an Ed, Edd and Eddy Demolition Derby game, a Kid Next Door action game, and the topic of this choice, some sort of Powerpuff Girls game. Now, I know how unspecific that sounds, I am aware, but my only memories of this elusive flash game was that the introduction of the game was a cutscene containing a meteor falling down and destroying a city, complete with a red and black sky in the background. For some reason, when I was a kid, the colours of red and black scared the absolute crap out of me. Separately they were fine, but the two of them together caused me many a nightmare back in the day. I associated the two colours with fear and horror, and so that's what they were to me for quite a while. So, this game, of course, begins with the death of what I assume is hundreds of people at the hands of the meteor, with my two favourite colours in the background. I remember literally nothing else about this game. I cannot find it anywhere. I don't even know what it was about it that made me think it was a Powerpuff Girls game. But for the life of me, I cannot find anything even remotely related to this game, and I think that's due to me remembering some details wrong. My memory isn't exactly the best, as you guys know. It isn't this game, that's for sure. The scariest thing about the reboot is that it exists. But I remember being scared off the website from this game, and to this day I still have absolutely no idea what it was or where to find it, which is most likely why it remains with me to this day. Okay, now onto something a bit closer to home. As I've covered in my previous videos, my introduction to Transformers was an interesting one. It was sometime during 2006 and 2007, though before the live-action movie. I was first introduced to Optimus Prime and the gang through Transformers Energon, Cybertron, and Beast Machines DVDs that my parents bought me and assumed would keep me entertained enough. And that they did. However, my first introduction to G1 was through 3 comics that my cousin gave me quite a while ago. These were the first 6 issues, packed together, of Dreamwave Productions' Prime Directive series, a comic set in its own Generation 1 continuity that was certainly not aimed at kids. I remember reading these comics and having absolutely no idea what was going on, and as I read it, the lack of context was what made it all the more creepy to me. I felt like I was missing something, and now that I am older I can safely say there was indeed quite a bit of context missing to me, due to me not reading the issues prior. Though I appreciate the art nowadays, when I initially read it I found it disturbing as the bots and humans were lifeless and just appeared empty. And of course the violence in the comics didn't help to quell my fears. The scene where the Seekers are playing with the disassembled Autobots particularly stuck with me, though it was also thanks in part to the mysterious virus that the human Lazarus unleashed that turned him and everyone around him into some sort of machine, and the gruesome death of Superion that made me somewhat intrigued by these comics, though also at the same time disturbed. The comic featured mind-controlled Autobots killing humans, Cybertronians having their decisions dictated by human captors, and there wasn't a moment in the comics I can remember not feeling unnerved by at all. There was no break for humor or rest, it was all action and dialogue, and that, to my 6-year-old self, was a bit much to handle. Though I never had the pleasure of being born in the 90s and owning a Nintendo 64, well, until literally a few days ago, my family had some friends that did have one, and a lot of my time whenever we would visit them was spent watching them play on their N64, particularly Mario Kart 64 and Super Mario 64. Conveniently, the 2 games I now have in my possession. One of those games became my favourite game of all time, Super Mario 64. In my opinion, one of the greatest masterpieces of gaming. I eventually got my hands on the DS port of the game and completed the hell out of it, but it was the original version that sat with me due to its older graphics causing the game to have a bit of an unnerving feeling to it. As I previously mentioned, as soon as I discovered YouTube, I literally never got off of it. Whether that be a good or a bad thing, I am yet to tell. However, a lot of what I watched was Game Shark Super Mario 64 hacking videos, and this was what continued my fascination of the game. It was, however, 3 particular things in the game that scared the absolute hell out of me once I finally got around to playing it, and even when I watched it online. Those were, of course, the chain chomp at the beginning of the game, the piano in Big Boo's Haunt, and the eel in Dire Dire Docks. In these levels, particularly in the former, I never felt safe. I always felt like I was being pursued by something, and, as I said, the limited graphics of the original game made these things absolutely horrifying to look at. Okay, we can do it this time, just slowly. Almost there. Come on. The chain chomp was bad, yes, but at least he was restrained. But the eel, and that freaking piano, yeah, rated E for everyone, my ass. Before Transformers and anime, I had 2 things in my life that I was completely obsessed with. Dinosaurs and cars. Both the movie and the actual vehicles. 2 stages I feel like every young boy goes through at some point in his life. Here is a picture of me with my cars collection. My pride and joy. I don't know exactly what it was about Lightning McQueen in the game that I liked so much to make me watch the movie 100 times, but it was probably one of my favorite things as a kid. It was also, however, the source of something that disturbed me for quite a bit. It wasn't in the actual movie, despite that stupid tractor tipping scene, but rather the Halloween special Maida and the Ghost Light. This short film scared the absolute shit out of me as a kid. The joke of the whole special is that Maida believes a ghost is pursuing him, when in actuality it is nothing but a light he has accidentally hooked into his cable. The way the short progresses though, with the eerie silences and the constant scares, definitely frightened me. And though the short nowadays is completely laughable, it freaked me out for quite a while. I think that's also thanks in part to the plot twist ending, with Maida discovering that it was a light the whole time, only to have a giant truck breathing heavily behind him at the conclusion. It was so scary that I told my parents, but they didn't really care. Because of this short, I quickly came to hate cars, and thank God for that, all things considered. As I've said in previous videos, one of my favourite cartoons as a kid, and still now, was the original Ben 10. Thanks to its awesome action scenes, memorable and cool looking aliens, charismatic protagonists, humorous moments, and the unique episode plots. A lot of the show should have been scary to me, but somehow wasn't. For example, the Mummy episode and the Ben Wolf episode, or even the episode The Tick, in which a giant disgusting bug creature sucks all the life out of Earth, but they did absolutely nothing for me. No, instead it was the episode Camp Fear, in which Ben and the gang come across an abandoned camp overrun by plant aliens, and the whole episode is just creepy and disturbing. Although it also saw the debut of Wildvine. It wasn't anything horrifying, but the dim lighting and the creepy plant enemies, as well as the fact that the Tennysons were trapped, made this episode one I used to avoid whenever I rewatched the series. Oh, that and the thing that scared me even more. Ghost Freak. I hate Ghost Freak. Despite initially starting off as just another transformation on the Omnitrix, Ghost Freak became a sentient alien that sought to escape the Watch, and though his normal form was creepy enough, his appearance once he escapes and becomes a scare was absolutely not okay. Nope. The twisted upside down head and the tentacles made him one of the most horrifying things I had ever seen, and it was honestly nerve-wracking seeing Ben powerless to defeat such a fearsome villain. Well, until he does. He did even in one episode take over Gwen's body and threaten to throw her off a building. This was pretty heavy stuff for what was supposed to be a kid's cartoon. Speaking of kids' cartoons, let's talk about my early introduction to anime. As most people start out, they aren't initially aware of the difference between anime and cartoon. The two are simply one and the same and equally enjoyable. The only anime I watched when I was younger was your classic Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z. It didn't go much further than that. Though I do remember one evening picking up the first Evangelion Rebuild movie at a library because there was a giant robot on the cover and only watching about 20 minutes of it before getting bored, and thank God I didn't watch the rest of it until I was older. A majority of my anime experiences at a young age were Dragon Ball related. This also includes Dragon Ball GT, the widely hated non-canon sequel to Z that was actually what introduced me to Goku and the others in the first place. My local Blockbuster, anyone remember those, had a few GT volumes, so I picked them up. The episodes were out of order and so made absolutely no sense, but I managed to watch them anyway, and I was absolutely horrified with what I saw. Two episodes in particular I remember scaring the hell out of me were the one where Goku is killed by Baby's death ball and sent to some sort of Monopoly-esque game where he has to play to win his life back, and the fight between the Super Saiyan 4 Goku and the giant Grade 8 Baby, which mostly involved Goku screaming his head off as he was crushed and beaten nearly to death by the fearsome giant. I was used to the more reserved action of American cartoons, and to see someone being nearly crushed to death while vomiting blood was admittedly a bit much for me to take at such a young age. I didn't know blood could come from there. One of my favourite duos as a kid was Wallace and Gromit, the claymation pair of the old inventor and his much more intelligent dog. Availability of these shorts was limited, and I had to actually watch TV to see them instead of looking them up on an internet that looked like this. But it was the feature-length film The Curse of the Were-Rabbit that scared me a lot as a kid. It's not the scariest thing on this list, but it kept me up at night for far too long. Though the actual were-rabbit itself was a bit goofy, and overall the movie has a family-friendly feel to it, it was the transformations into the rabbit that scared me way too much. The combination of the old, almost creepy-looking claymation style, and the fact that the movie was set mostly at night got to me. And though now I can watch it without fear, I recall not even being able to sit through the whole film because I was so terrified of this movie. And yet, I was able to watch the close shave short without even flinching. I was a very special child. But oh, it gets worse. Now we get into the stuff that really kept me up at night. Fun fact about me, my family has Italian heritage. Trust me, this information is relevant. This is because my grandparents hail from Italy. As a result, a lot of my life, particularly my diet and customs, have been affected by this. In some cases, it is a fantastic thing, and in some others, it's not. For example, one of the films that my grandparents loved to watch with me when I was a kid was a film that goes by the title of, and severe apologies to any actual Italian viewers, while I may have Italian history, it doesn't mean I can speak it, Le Avventure di Pinocchio, which was released in 1972. Now, while a lot of kids complain about the Disney movie having that terrifying donkey transformation scene, at least their Pinocchio looked like this. Mine, well, being an old movie and one that saw little release due to it being a foreign film, I got to have a protagonist in the form of this! The film was dark and depressing, with Pinocchio and Geppetto living in poverty and being subjected to cruelty, neglect, and other terrors throughout the film. I don't actually recall exactly what happened in it, though I do recall it following the traditional Pinocchio story, complete with horrifying whale scene. There's just something about old movies that's just eerie and unsettling, and no film fits the bill better than this one. And yet it remains one of the movies I've seen over and over due to it holding a reasonable significance for me and my grandparents. Sonic the Hedgehog became one of the things that I was most obsessed with when I was a kid, and as a result that led to me discovering a lot of stuff I really regret seeing. These include the Sonic CD secret message that scared the absolute hell out of me when I first saw it, and the wonderful Art of Tails doll people put all over the internet, including the clip of him at the end of the Sonic Shorts animations on YouTube that I absolutely loved, until I saw this orange bastard at the end of the third volume. Screw you, see you in hell, thank God I didn't find Sonic EXE until years later. But nothing hit quite as hard as an episode of the Sonic anime, Sonic X. Sonic X was yet another anime that I had the misfortune of watching, and despite 4Kids PG-ifying the crap out of it, it still served as a movie that my parents didn't like me watching due to Knuckles saying shut up in one of the episodes. I remember having to mute my TV whenever he said it. Yes, really. Much like GT before it, Sonic X was a show that I grabbed as many volumes of as I could whenever I went to Blockbuster, aside from one volume, Volume 6, containing the episode Sonic Scream Test. This episode scared the absolute shit out of me, so much so that I couldn't watch it for years on end until finally finding the courage to sit through the whole thing. The reason for this absolute terror were the main antagonists of the episode, the ghosts, or Boom Boos as they're called. These things have an absolutely bone-chilling appearance, with creepy, disturbing smiles and terrifying eyes. On their own, they're a little unsettling, sure, but it's what they do to the characters in the episode that is truly terrifying. Sonic and the gang wind up at a haunted castle for Chris's mother's film shoot, and once night comes, they are terrorized by ghosts wanting to capture them and send them into a spirit realm where they can be eaten. It was what the ghosts looked like when they possessed characters such as Amy and Chris's mother, however, that truly terrified me for many years, and I'll admit, still a little to this day.
Amy! Please, Amy, open your eyes for me.
This is fine. Who the hell at 4Kids thought this was appropriate for kids? They didn't let this through because that's inappropriate, but no, this is fine. Yep, this is good. Good work, guys. Yep. Seriously, screw this episode. So, remember how I mentioned I used to go to Blockbuster a lot? Well, I also used to borrow a lot of games there too. Ah, the good old days. Some of these games I felt like I haven't played in hundreds of years, and yet I used to borrow them over and over back in the day. One of these games was Monster Jam Maximum Destruction. Remember that obsession with cars I mentioned? Well, it carries over to monster trucks! Anyway, this game was basically a racing game, and I used to play it religiously, and everything was great. You could drive around, destroy things, blow stuff up, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this mother... And finally, we discuss something that is actually scary. This one is not for the faint of heart, and I definitely do not recommend looking this one up. And I'm genuinely serious about that. This is not one of those he told me not to look it up, so I'm going to look it up anyway because I'm curious warnings. I am genuinely warning you, this video is incredibly disgusting, disturbing, and potentially traumatizing, so I'm telling you to be smart and resist the temptation if you don't want to be scarred for life. Check it out if you haven't heard of it or are a fan of horror, but if not, I'm serious, do not look this one up. Just take my word for it. As I previously mentioned, I used YouTube quite a bit at a very young age. However, while in my younger years I stuck to Mario 64 hacks and pivot animations, I soon began to explore the depths of the website. And on one fateful evening, I came across the wonderful video DYE Fantasy, which to this day remains the scariest thing I have ever seen. I have not rewatched this video since I saw it way back when based on fear, and even when making this video now, I still chose not to watch it. All I remember is that it was an animation of a bunch of teenagers breaking into a pool, swimming around for a bit, then one of the guys makes a move on the girl, and then they all turn into horrible monsters and start eating each other, and it's the most disgusting thing I've ever had to witness. This video, which was sadly available for anyone to watch on YouTube, as it wasn't blocked by the age restriction that protects it now, so my 9-year-old self was subjected to bloody violence and horrifying monsters in a manner that I wasn't yet prepared for, and to this day it still haunts me. I'm usually pretty okay with violence, but it's something about the gruesome violence in anime that really gets to me. And there's nothing quite like DYE Fantasy that has scared me as much since.